Welcome to the Defenders of Business Value, the podcast that helps business owners unlock the value they've built and exit on their terms. I'm your host, Ed Meisegland, and for the last 30 years, I've been helping business owners prepare, grow, protect, and ultimately sell their businesses. Whether you're a business owner, a buyer, or an advisor guiding others through the process, if you want to make your last deal your best one, you are in the right place. So let's get started. So if you've ever thought of selling your business, you probably assume that the hardest thing is getting to the deal, building it, growing it, finding a buyer, and that's where most owners focus. But that's only part of the story. And today, my guest is TK Herman. And I saw a LinkedIn post and he had 4 exits. And I'm like, geez, this is the guy I want to talk to. And on his LinkedIn profile, it says, my last paycheck was when I was 26 years old. And then this guy's gone on to build and exit 4 companies. After 3 decades of doing this, sure, I'm certain he can tell us what creates value inside of business. And so what made this conversation a little bit different was that, it goes beyond strategy, because TK was very open about what owners are thinking. And I wanted to go a little bit further into the internal side of building and selling a company. And so this mindset, which he calls head trash, the beliefs can quietly limit your growth long before the market ever gives you any kind of market feedback. So today we talk about what buyers really value, where founders get it wrong, and, the changes that occur once the deal is done. Because you're building a business and to one day exit it, this is not just about the company. It's about whether you're prepared for what comes next. So here is my conversation with TK Herman. I hope you enjoy it. TK, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate that.
Right out of the gate, your last paycheck was when you were 26, right? So tell me, at that time, what got you into entrepreneurship?
It's a great question. I don't, again, when I was young, I never thought I would go down this path. I didn't have anybody in my family. I suppose my uncle owned a hardware store, but he was the closest thing that I knew to an entrepreneur. But I did have friends, good friends of mine whose parents growing up were entrepreneurs. I tended to gravitate towards having conversations with the dad of those friends, but I never thought this is really my path. I didn't know what I was going to do. I graduated college in 1983 and didn't really have an idea what I wanted to do. And it was really, I think I got fired from my first 2 jobs. So if you go read my LinkedIn profile and look at my experience and read from the bottom up, it tells a story. And the first 2 jobs I was fired from. So the second job I got fired from, I remember it was probably maybe a 15 or 20 person company, small. I was in sales. I'm sure I deserved to be fired. But I remember then that I would just see like the owner and his son, who was like the CFO, just enjoying the fruits of their labor in terms of the company building, right? And I remember it kind of, I guess, sitting in my head at that point in time that I want to be on that side of the equation. I didn't know what that meant, at all. It was, again, I had a couple more jobs after that I finally led me down the path of entrepreneurship. I will tell you, the day that I quit my job, when I referenced back that my last paycheck was when I was 26, I vividly recall the feeling of, and then like the internal knowing that I don't know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I just know that once I cross this line, there's no way I can go back. And that's been that way ever since.
When you did, was there fear? Did you have fear of the unknown, or it was like, whatever's next is got to be better than what I've left?
I don't know that I looked at it that way. And there wasn't a ton of fear because I didn't have kids at the time, so my financial needs were very, very small. And so it really wasn't like a big leap of faith because I always knew that I could go back and get a job at some point if I wanted to. So it really wasn't that kind of a decision point where I was like, man, this is a huge leap of faith. If I had made that decision when, my kids were, 2 and 5, that's a whole different ballgame at that point in time.
Is it better to go in as a 26-year-old and learn and pay the tuition, or is it better to get some, you have some reps, you're 35 to 45, you've seen the world a little bit, you've probably been mentored a little bit, and maybe your odds of success increase a little bit. What do you think?
It's hard for me to answer that question because I don't have the lens of doing it later in life. Again, just for me, because I'm 54 today, where I was at those stages of life, I think the decision point for me would be a lot harder if I was, 35, 40, 45 years old. Because again, like I said, got a family, I've got bills to pay, I got a mortgage to pay, car payments, saving for retirement, all those kind of things. So I do feel like it was pretty low risk. The biggest risk for me, like I was saying, was really more along the lines that I knew, like I just knew in my gut and intuitively knew that if I cross this chasm and I go towards, entrepreneurship, I just don't see any way that I can ever go back. And man, it would be really difficult for me to go back and work for somebody else. Now, I mean, there's certainly things that seem appealing about that, no doubt about it, but it would be just very difficult to do at this stage.
Would you tell your 26-year-old self to go back at it?
My 26-year-old self, 1000% get in the game now, because it is, with AI, it is an absolute gold rush. I have this feeling inside of me now that existed when I was, again, in my mid-20s, as the dot-com era was coming to be. I feel like I sat on my hands during the dot-com revolution, and I look back and I just didn't have the internal confidence to believe in myself. And I also thought on a small scale. And so today, I'm actually toying with a couple of different ideas right now. And I was just having a conversation with my best thought partner, which is Claude, yesterday around the fact that I don't want to wake up at 70 and realize I had a huge opportunity in front of me again, given to me on a silver platter again, and I sat on my hands a second time, right? And so I'm really wrestling with that decision, because the other part of the decision is, do I want to get back in the game at that level?
I'm in the same camp. I mean, we're here in the deal space. I mean, just the changes that are coming, and I mean, just across the board. And I wrote a LinkedIn article last week or the week before, because I truly believe AI is it's not coming for small business. I think it's going to change the landscape, and those businesses that are out in the sticks, that are owner-centric, that they're too risky to buy today. I think you layer on Claude or Cowork or something to that effect where you mitigate that risk, and all of a sudden that company becomes much more viable to the economic engine of deal making. So I'm with you. I've got some young guys here that are running really fast with AI, right? And the quality control side of me, right? It's one of those things of, okay, yeah, you did it fast. Did you do it right? Is it accurate? I think that they lack the wisdom, right? They have the knowledge, but they don't have the wisdom to know whether or not it's right. The younger group is looking at job replacement. You and I, at our demographic, we're looking at it's a tool, right? We've seen other tools. And as you were saying, thought partner, same kind of thing. They're not looking at it as a thought partner. They're looking at, how do I cover more professional ground quicker, right?
There's two things I'll say. One is it a tool that you're using to make yourself more efficient and move faster? Or is it a tool that you're using to shortcut? If you're using it as a tool to shortcut, that's a problem.
I'm with you. Well, swinging back to your exits, what did you learn from each, or was each a little bit different? What did it teach you, or was there a common thread?
I never thought about it that way. I don't know that there was a common thread, but I have learned a ton. So my main business was a software development company. We had about 120 employees. We did custom development work. So we did enterprise level mobile apps, web apps, and web development for big projects, big global companies. And we had an amazing, amazing team at the company. My business partner and I, he's my co-founder. We started with just the two of us and then grew it over an 18-year period. I mean, at one point, obviously, I'm like, okay, the whole point of building this is to exit at some point. But I didn't know what I didn't know. And so an opportunity came up. We ended up having conversations and decided to go move forward with it. I learned a ton of lessons around that, both positive and negative, right? But there's always lessons in the negative too, for sure. Learned a ton of lessons around that. Well, while we had that business, I've always had like side things. And my side thing was myself and a different individual. We co-owned three Sky Zone indoor trampoline parks. Two of them were in Indiana and one in Ohio. We actually were going to exit those pre-COVID. And then we had a deal. I had a deal put together, found the buyer, negotiated the deal, had the LOI signed. And literally we were supposed to close middle of April of 2020, and everything shuts down middle of March. So it put the kibosh on the deal. We did end up exiting those in September of 21. So just a few months after we sold the software consultancy, we sold that as well. So I went into that deal having more knowledge clearly than I had before, because I'd never done a deal before, and so whether it's, understanding the motivation behind the buyer, understanding the legal side of things, understanding the tax implications. I mean, I've just learned a ton. I've learned more literally in the last 5 years of entrepreneurship than I did in the previous 20 years, without question.
Did you have representation or just have your accountant and attorney and found your buyer yourself and hacked all the way through it? What did your deal team look like?
On the 4 exits I've had, I've never had like a banker, like an investment banker or an M&A guy involved on my side of things. I have a team of people on my side, like attorneys, accountants, that kind of stuff, that are looking through all of this, but nobody's brought us to market. The company that acquired our software company, they came through a referral that they had acquired another company ahead of us, and we were friends with that CEO. He'd reached out and said, hey, I know it's not time for you guys yet, because we talked about that. We just did this deal, and they're looking for another person. It was a roll-up strategy. We have a conversation. I'm like, I'll talk to anybody. Talked to him, and then started thinking about really just not just the timing in the market, which actually in hindsight turned out to be like perfect timing at the maximum valuation in terms of multiples, but also just timing in my life as well. At that point in time in my life, I had gone through a divorce a few years before, but I had no cash, at that point, because all my cash went away in my divorce. So I owned things, but I was very asset rich, cash poor. And so I saw it as an opportunity for me to take chips off the table. And so learned a ton through that. Then the Sky Zone one, again, it's just a different animal, because that's a business to consumer business. We actually had a deal set with a buyer, but because we were a franchise, the franchise had a 30-day right of first refusal. And so literally on day 28, they came back to us, and the franchise group said, we'll buy them. And that actually ended up being a much better situation for us, because just like transferring leases and doing those kind of things, there was a big corporate entity that was acquiring us and taking the leases over as opposed to an individual. So there's just less hoops to jump through. And then when we sold the consulting business, the software company in 21, we spun out a SaaS business out of that. That was a negotiated deal. We'd spent several $1 million developing a product inside of that company. The people that acquired us didn't want the product, so we negotiated taking the product with us plus picking 5 people to go along. And so we had that business operational for about 4 years, maybe. It was growing at a nice pace. We had received multiple calls. I didn't work day to day in the business. My business partner actually ran that business day to day. And he received tons of calls. I received tons of reach outs, on LinkedIn for potential buyers. One day we sort of realized that, we're at a point now where we've sort of stretched and maximized probably number one, we were gonna have to raise more money. Number two, we knew we were running up against a ceiling in terms of knowledge on how to grow it to the next level. There were a couple options in front of us. One was, let's go out and raise some real money ourselves. Let's go raise 10, 15 million bucks and do this the right way and hire a professional CEO for a SaaS business, hire a professional director of marketing, director of sales. And those are heavy lifts. Or the other option was to hitch our wagon to somebody else. And we ended up going that route because as we weighed out the financials on both sides, we felt like that was a less risky model that would get us farther faster than if we did it on our own. And I'm super glad that we did it. So I had somebody reach out to me on LinkedIn. I just took the conversation, drove to Chicago. I live in Indiana, met with him for like 4 hours that day. And then it was literally 6 months to the day later, we closed the deal with them. That was a challenging one too, because this was a company that was acquiring us that was private equity backed. And so it was super fun. Like I love business. I love deals. I love thinking through things. I like solving problems. The guys on the other side of the transaction, they're all like, undergrad, Ivy League masters, right? So it's all Harvard MBAs. The PE firms are out of Boston. And so, here I am, a Ball State University grad, that was a B and C student at Ball State, and my opponent, are Harvard MBAs. That was honestly a ton of fun. Like I really, really enjoyed that. I'm super good friends with them today. Like we get along really well. I thought it was a good deal all the way around. And then the other exit in there too was my fourth one was a freaking disaster. I would say a lot of colorful things because it was awful. I mean, I lost $2.3 million. I lit $2.3 million on fire in this whole thing. And I was able to exit out of that and get out of it and stop the bleeding with a potential upside that I was like, it's probably not going to happen, which it did not happen. It was painful, but it was also like literally the most stressed time period of my entire life. January of 2024, woke up in the morning in early September. And mind you, it was just constant stress the entire time for a multitude of reasons. I literally thought I was going to have a heart attack on at least 3 or 4 occasions, like legit. I think I'm having a heart attack. And I'm like, if I have a heart attack over a freaking pickleball business, this is crazy. And so I'm laying in bed in early September of 24. My wife's still asleep, and I'm just stressed to the max. I'm like, I'm done. I'm pulling the ripcord. Because I was having to put 50, 60,000 a month into this, and I could have kept going, but the problem was I couldn't see the end, right?
Yeah.
And so here I am laying there in bed, and it's like, am I a failure? What did I do? I knew I was lighting $2.3 million on fire. And I'm like, you know what? It's not worth it. And I started, as I thought through that, I thought to myself, I think it takes more courage to pull the ripcord when you're in that deep than it does to keep going. And so I pulled the ripcord, got out. The franchise group came in and bought us, right?
Sure.
But this is how the conversation goes. Okay, like literally in the span of like 5 minutes. Okay, give me $1 million. No. Okay, give me $500,000. No. Okay, give me 250. No. Okay, just give me 100. No. But we'll figure something out on the back end. And I'm like, fine, just literally just take the thing.
Sure. I don't want any cheese, just one out of the trap. I get it.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, the deal I negotiated with him, obviously I already gave you the end game, which it didn't work. But the deal I negotiated, I was actually super proud of. I had put this deal together, sent it over to my accountant, and this whole deal happened literally from start of conversation to close was 2 weeks. I had an attorney on my end on the very front end. I called the attorney that we've used on the other 2 deals, or the other 3 deals, called him, and I said on a Friday night, I'm like, hey, I got this thing I'm putting together. Is there any chance you can work me in? And I go, it needs to close in 2 weeks. He's like, come on, man. I can't do that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to send you over the LOI we have right now. You just give me a list of all the bullet points that I need to think through on this thing. And he goes, I'll do that. So like a day later, I get the bullet points, and then I just go to town after that, working my way through it. When we had the final deal put together, I sent it over to my accountant, and he was like, I have no idea how you negotiated this deal, but I'm actually super impressed. And I'm like, well, thank you, because I worked my butt off on it,
Yeah. So what were the attributes that he was so impressed with? What made it such a great deal? I'm assuming you had some sort of performance-based earnout, or
it was basically pushing everything over to them, which was still me walking away with a huge loss. But I was going to get every dime out of that business up to a pretty healthy point over a 10-year period. And so I figured if there's any chance of me and this working out, me getting any money back on my investment, this is the deal to have.
Yeah, nice. Well, I mean, you can tell that you have kind of a command of the domains you've been in. And I'm just kind of curious because we bump into who needs to go full process in a sale versus, you know what, I can do this myself, right? I mean, you went and found the buyer. I'm assuming you got a ton of outreach, right? Through LinkedIn, calls, and so on and so forth. And then you just decided to, okay, I can pretty much figure out who's the signal amongst the noise, and let's just go start talking with them. Do you regret not taking it full process to see if there was a bigger swath of buyers?
So again, this is one of the things it's like I said, I've learned more in the last 5 years than I have in the previous 20. There's an example. So the company that acquired our software company, again, it was a private equity backed roll-up strategy, right? Their whole plan was to flip the whole thing at some point. And I knew that we were late in the game. So I was expecting to flip, at the soonest, maybe 18 months, maybe 24 months. Okay. So we closed the deal in June of 2021, and in mid-December of 2021, 6 months later, they flipped the whole thing. And so clearly I know today, I don't know today, but it's obvious, they were working, because this other deal was a big deal. And with a big, multinational, multi-billion-dollar conglomerate that was going to acquire the whole thing. So clearly they were working on that deal when they were putting ours together. And had I known that, you can rest assured that we would have pushed the price up quite a bit, because I don't know. I know what our multiple on EBITDA was. I don't know what they ultimately sold us, or because again, they mashed it all together, but what they sold it for. But I would have to guess that it was probably at least another turn, on what they paid us, the value that we brought to the table. Those are things today that I know to think about. I've never done it before. And so I would definitely bring in a professional person that's been there, done that. Because even just on the tax side of things, like another example is like if we were actually looking to sell, 1,000% we could have cut $500,000 in expense, and so we had a 10x multiple, on our EBITDA. And so that $500,000, we would have not even flinched had we cut that. That's $5 million, on the EV. And so just those kind of thoughts, we didn't think through it a lot. And there's obviously tax stuff too that goes into the mix.
And people just don't understand just what a big undertaking it is to sell a company. And I mean, it's pretty easy to agree on a price. It's really hard to get it from price to close, right? One of the things that you said that I've found in researching this is that people can grow with the company, outgrow it, or be outgrown. Intuitively, you know that, right? I thought that was an eloquent way to say that. And I guess where I'm going with this, I wanted to know, how does that mindset affect performance and ultimately valuation? I'm looking at the people, right? And to our earlier conversation about AI, I think this intertwines with it a lot, specifically the outgrown.
So I've got a lot of like catchphrases and things that I say, but that's definitely one of them that a long, long time ago, I figured out that there are 3 paths that somebody could take through our company. Path number 1 is they'll be there for the long haul, which is great. That's the forever employee. But in today's world, that's not really that realistic. Path number 2 is the person will outgrow the company, right? So in other words, what they want to do is either something that we just don't offer. We had an employee one time that their dream was to be a college professor. Okay, well, that's clearly not with us, right? I remember having the conversation and discovering that and then saying to them, well, how do I help you become a college professor? And they're like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, as soon as you figure out something I can do, let me know. I'm willing to pour into them and invest in them, knowing that they're not going to be here for the long haul, right? And that cements this, like, I don't know, just this trust factor. And that really starts to cement the culture of the business as well, because we ran the business that way. And then the third path is the company will outgrow the person. In that case, the company's growing. As the company grows and changes, I mean, what worked, when you hit $1 million in revenue is not going to work when you hit $10 million in revenue. And the sophistication at 15 million in revenue is very different than the sophistication at 5 million in revenue. As your company grows and changes, not everybody's going to grow and change with the company. The point is that's okay. Like you have to be, as the entrepreneur or the CEO, the leader of the business, you have to be okay with the company outgrowing somebody, right? Because when that happens, it's like in a way, like you're releasing the person to go on their path that makes them the happiest. Those are hard decisions to make because you work closely enough with people long enough, you become friends with them, And so when you have to make those calls, those are difficult calls to make. But I think ultimately what that turns into and the way that we operated the business, like this is where it has to come from the heart and be genuine. Otherwise people feel it. Like I'm a huge believer that you can feel the energy, between people. So if you came to work at our company, I genuinely cared more about you as a human being and doing whatever I could possibly to do to help you live just a happy, love-filled, joyful life. I didn't really care about the work product because I knew that if I took care of you in that way, that karma would take care of me on the back end, right? And that was a true thing. I mean, we had an outstanding culture at our company. Yeah, I knew it was good. And then when we sold and it was destroyed, I really knew it was good. But it was interesting because when we were going through that first sale, I'll never forget the company that was acquiring us. They were doing their due diligence and they could not figure out how we had extremely low turnover. Even for our industry was low turnover anyways. We had super, super low turnover, but we had no bonus program in place. We had no bonuses that were paid at the end of the year. And they couldn't figure out, like, how do you have such low turnover, but you have no bonus program? Because it was about the culture that we'd built, within the business. To me, it was a case study on how not to do it. Because to them, I'm sure they made a crap ton of money, but to them, it was a game of hot potato. So they mashed these companies together and then they found a buyer and they're like, here you go. I mean, the value of that company today is probably 25% of what they paid for it 5 years ago. It was horrible. My theory always was, what if we put a fund together, went out and acquired some businesses and did a roll-up strategy, but did it almost, I'm going to say like an ethical way, in the sense that what if we acquire these businesses and we operate them as if they're a 20-year hold, all the while looking out the periphery to see, look for an exit ramp, right? I know that if we do that, we're going to give up some meat on the bone for sure, because, you know, you're going to invest in the business in a way that's different if you're only going to hold it for 5 years, for example, right? And so you're going to give up some meat in the bone, but you're going to create a happy environment for your people. And I think you're going to feel really, really good when you hand that business off to the next buyer.
I do believe as you start thinking about risk, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, or just from valuation, right? When you talk about outgrow, right? When buyers are looking at companies, you know, I know that they're looking at those employees. If I'm buying a company that's at 2 million in revenue and I want it to go to 10, are the butts in the seats got to be able to facilitate that, right? And if I'm an astute buyer, I'm sitting here going, I'm not really certain that you're the team that's going to get that job done. Or maybe it is. And then you preserve that value. Culture does matter. I don't care what company you're talking about. It matters. And going to work and wanting to be there, and the people around you wanting to work and make the joint better, that means something.
During COVID, when everything was shut down, we were super flexible on time. Like, we were definitely an in the office company, but very flexible. Like, nobody is standing over your shoulder. I will happily check in with you all day long. But if I have to check up on you, now we have a trust issue, right? There's a difference between those two things. No problem at all. So then we go totally remote, everything's shut down. We had this thing in our company where we always made these t-shirts. Like any event came up, we had an amazing graphic design team that put some pretty creative stuff together. The company is called Aptera. We had the Aptera Quarantine Crew t-shirts. One of the designers put in the design of it. It said, "I miss my friends." I didn't tell him to put that in there. He just did it, right? That was absolutely symbolic of what we had built the company.
And people should aspire to it. The funny thing is that people don't understand what their company could be if it was, right? And does that prompt a lot of people that don't have it to sell, right? And I want out of this because, you know, if it's a miserable place to work or, you know, to go in, why would you want to keep it, right? Versus your situation and where it's like, look, I want to build another one that we can hold for 20 years, right?
I'm a firm believer in this. A company will never outperform the internal subconscious self-image of the CEO. Okay. And so, you know, people don't quit companies or jobs, they quit people, right? And so if you've got turnover in your business, or if you've got turmoil in your business, or if you've got challenges in your business, and you're the entrepreneur, the first place you should start looking is right in the mirror, right? Because there's a reason that's happening in your company. And you've got to look in the mirror. You got to ask yourself, how did I cause this? And that's a hard thing to do. It's easy to go, oh, this person, you know, that person. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, if you find yourself at a spot, because one of the things I enjoy doing is talking with other fellow entrepreneurs, and there's a handful just over the last couple of weeks that are sort of stuck, like they haven't moved to the next level, and they've been there for a while. And, you know, my questions to them are, okay, so what are you doing to cause you to be stuck? Like what are you doing? How are you causing that, right? And that's a hard thing to do. I think it's beneficial in your life, period. But certainly when it comes to a business, you've got to look at that. And if you're struggling and you're stressed out, and the same thing with me with this pickleball business, like, I mean, it was horrible. I don't regret it because I learned a ton. Like, why did I even get myself in that position to begin with? You know, I've got a pretty clear answer on that, and I'm not making that mistake again.
All right, I have one final question. I've asked this for, I think you're going to be episode 149 or 150. So if you had one piece of advice that you could give to a business owner that would either add value or make the business more saleable, what would it be?
Figure out what your head trash is and your stories are in your head and work on yourself. Because we all carry stories in our head. We all do. My stories are, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm lazy. I'm an imposter. You know, and I'm not smart enough, I'm not good enough, I'm lazy, come from childhood. I've done the personal development work to figure out where that stuff comes from. The imposter comes later because in my head, remember, I know that I'm not smart enough. I know that I'm not good enough. I know that I'm lazy, but I have a measure of business success. So I have to be an imposter, right? And what you don't realize, all of those stories oftentimes sit at the subconscious level, unless you do the work to kind of excavate those out. But you don't realize how those stories affect all areas of your life, not just entrepreneurship, but all areas. And so as an example, I just did a LinkedIn video post about a couple weeks ago on this. It really became clear to me, it's probably 11 or 12 years ago now. I was going through a personal development course, and it was the first time I'd ever done something like this before. It was just me doing it. And actually, my wife and I did it together. But I got smacked in the face with a 2x4 like on a regular basis in this course. And it was a super intense, very experiential course. It was like 22 days over the course of like 4 months. But as I was going through this course, that's where I first started recognizing that I had these narratives in my head. And I started recognizing that I would collect evidence to support these narratives I had my whole life. I can't tell you exactly where the not smart enough came from. I can give examples of how I've collected evidence to support that narrative, right? Because that's the belief I had. And then where it really came to light from a business perspective was I was sitting in a meeting in our conference room, and I happened to sit at the head of the conference room table. It wasn't even my meeting, but I'm sitting there, I don't know, probably 8 or 10 people in the room. And there's this conversation going on. It was nothing that I was really involved with, but I'm sitting there listening to this conversation go on. I'm paying attention to the thoughts that I have in my head at the time. And I realized that I want to ask the question, but I'm not asking a question. And then I'm like, well, why am I not asking a question? And it was because I was afraid. I was afraid that I'd ask this question and somebody would go, that's a stupid question. Or they'd say, dude, you're the CEO of the company. How do you not know that? Here's the insanity of all this. And again, everybody has this to some degree, whether they realize it or not. And my stories are my stories. They're not your stories. You have your own. But here I was literally sitting in a building that I owned at a company that I started, surrounded by people that I employed. And I'm afraid to ask a question because I'm afraid that they're going to think I'm a stupid person. Those stories for me, they'll never go away. They're like programmed into me. They're hard coded into me. I learned today now, like when those stories do pop up, I know it's a bullshit story, right? And I can course correct fairly easily. Again, this was 11 years ago. Every day I'm paying attention to and I'm looking for evidence to prove the opposite, because every day, every piece of evidence I find to prove the opposite, it just quiets that story down just a little more. Right. And so that's why I say that I believe that if a business owner really wants to grow their business, start looking in the mirror and grow yourself first. Because the more that you expand you on the inside, the more room you create for expansion in all areas of your life. And business happens to be one of those.
Nice. So TK, where can everybody find you? What are you up to? And where can people find and interact with you?
I do try to post quite a bit on LinkedIn. If somebody wants to message me there, that's an easy way. That's probably the best way. I mean, my handle on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and X are just TK Herman, no spaces on all of those platforms. We just sold a SaaS business last July. And so I've got a couple of things cooking right now. I'm super passionate and super excited about. I'm weighing heavily, do I start another company or not?
Well, TK, I'm telling you, what a great conversation. I so appreciate all the time you gave me, and certainly our audience will resonate with your message. So thanks again.
Thanks for listening to the Defenders of Business Value. If today's episode helped you think differently about building or selling a business, follow the show so you don't miss what's next. And if you want to become a more informed, confident owner, the one who knows how to grow, protect, and eventually exit at maximum value, subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the show notes. And if you're ready to talk about your next deal, connect with me on LinkedIn. So until next time, we'll see you soon.